The world is holding its breath, gripped by uncertainty and anxiety, as a new and dangerous crisis begins to unfold. In the heart of the Caribbean, a region known for its beauty and strategic importance, tensions are suddenly erupting into a full-blown emergency. On September 19, 2025, the fragile relationship between the United States and Venezuela has reached a boiling point, with echoes of the darkest days of the Cold War reverberating across the globe. This isn't just another diplomatic spat. Warships are on the move, military convoys are mobilizing, and the risk of real conflict is higher than it's been in decades. The United States, under President Donald Trump, has escalated its response from economic sanctions to overt military pressure, pushing Venezuela to the very brink of confrontation. But Venezuela, far from backing down, has found a powerful ally: China, whose involvement has dramatically raised the stakes. With China's entry into the fray, what began as a regional standoff has now escalated into a global power struggle, drawing in the world's superpowers. Why does this matter? Because the consequences could hit your wallet, disrupt global supply chains, send oil prices soaring, and threaten the stability of the entire world economy. The world is watching. Can diplomacy pull us back from the brink, or are we witnessing the opening act of a new Cold War, with all its dangers and uncertainties? In this video, we'll break down the military buildup, the economic stakes, and the global reactions that are shaping this crisis. What's really driving these nations? Is it principle, national pride, or simply a scramble for power and control over vital resources? As the crisis unfolds, the stakes couldn't be higher, and the world is bracing for what might come next. The ripples from this confrontation could reach every corner of the globe, affecting ordinary lives in ways we can't yet predict. The question now, will cooler heads prevail and steer us away from disaster, or is the world truly on the edge of chaos? The crisis in Venezuela escalated rapidly, with tensions boiling over in the streets of Caracas as demonstrators clashed with security forces. The situation took a dramatic turn when President Trump announced a significant U.S. military buildup in the Caribbean, signaling a new phase in American involvement. In late August, a powerful carrier strike group led by the USS Gerald R. Ford, accompanied by destroyers, submarines, and advanced patrol aircraft, moved into strategic positions just off Venezuela's coast, sending a clear message to the Maduro regime. Officially, the Pentagon cited freedom of navigation and stepped up anti-trafficking operations as the reasons for this deployment, but the underlying message was unmistakable. Washington was now willing to apply direct military pressure on President Maduro's government. Trump declared that all options were on the table, going so far as to brand Venezuela a narco-state and accusing its leaders of criminal activity. He vowed to restore democracy to the Venezuelan people, promising that the U.S. would not stand by as the crisis deepened. His rhetoric was blunt and uncompromising, carefully crafted to intimidate Maduro's inner circle and demonstrate unwavering American resolve. After years of economic sanctions and diplomatic isolation failed to topple Maduro, Washington shifted its strategy, turning to the threat of military might. The hope was that overwhelming force would finally force concessions from the regime, or perhaps even cause the government to collapse under the pressure. But this bold move carries enormous risks, pushing the crisis ever closer to the brink of open conflict and potential war. It also risks drawing in global powers like China and Russia, who have their own interests in Venezuela and could intervene to protect them. The world's attention is now fixed on the region, with international media and governments watching every development, waiting to see what happens next. Will this unprecedented show of force finally break the political deadlock, or could it ignite a much larger and far more dangerous conflict that engulfs the region? The stakes have never been higher, with the fate of Venezuela and perhaps regional stability hanging in the balance. The Caribbean has become the world's most dangerous flashpoint, a geopolitical hotspot where the next move could change history. Venezuela's response was immediate and defiant. President Maduro, flanked by generals, declared a state of alert and vowed to resist any foreign invasion. Mass demonstrations filled Caracas, with crowds chanting anti-American slogans and rallying behind the government. The military mobilized, deploying troops and missile systems along the coast, and launched nationwide drills. Venezuela's message: any U.S. intervention would come at a high cost. Diplomatically, Caracas sought support from allies and condemned the U.S. at the United Nations. By escalating its rhetoric and military posture, Venezuela called Washington's bluff, raising the stakes for everyone. The crisis was now a test of wills, with no sign of backing down. The standoff took a dramatic turn when China sent a naval task force to the Caribbean. Officially, it was a goodwill visit and joint exercises, but the real message was clear. China was backing Venezuela and challenging U.S. dominance in its own backyard. Images of Chinese warships near U.S. carriers signaled a seismic shift in global power. China called for dialogue but firmly opposed foreign intervention, highlighting its strategic partnership with Venezuela. Chinese media portrayed the U.S. as an aggressor and China as a defender of sovereignty. For Maduro, China's support was a lifeline, deterring U.S. action and boosting morale. The crisis was no longer regional, it was a three-way superpower showdown. The era of uncontested U.S. dominance in the Americas was over. With China's navy in the Caribbean, Washington's calculations became far more complicated. The world was now watching a new kind of Cold War unfold. Why did China take such a bold risk? The answer: economics, strategy, and ambition. China has billions invested in Venezuela's oil, and regime change could threaten its energy security. But this is also about global influence. China is showing it can project power far from home, just as the US does in Asia. By sending warships to the Caribbean, Beijing is challenging the old rules and asserting itself as a peer competitor. It's also about ideology. Supporting Venezuela means resisting US pressure and building a coalition of nations outside the American orbit. For China, this is a calculated move to reshape global politics and reduce US dominance. The stakes are high, but Beijing believes the risk is worth it. The crisis has divided Latin America and unsettled US allies worldwide. Colombia and Brazil, longtime critics of Maduro, publicly back Washington but fear war on their borders. Privately, their leaders urge caution, desperate to avoid a regional catastrophe. Other nations, like Argentina and Mexico, call for restraint and push for diplomacy, refusing to endorse military action. The region is fractured, with no consensus on how to handle the crisis. China's involvement has only deepened the divisions, forcing countries to navigate a dangerous US-China rivalry. Across the Atlantic, NATO allies offer rhetorical support, but have little appetite for conflict. European leaders urge de-escalation, worried about global stability and energy markets. Behind closed doors, many criticize Washington's aggressive stance. The lack of unity among US allies highlights the global unease, and Washington's growing isolation. The world is anxious, and the path forward is anything but clear. The crisis is shaking the global economy. Oil prices have surged, with Brent crude jumping over 15% as traders fear disruption in Venezuela and the Caribbean. Stock markets worldwide are rattled and the fear gauge is spiking. Businesses are delaying investments and consumer confidence is falling. The risk of conflict here could trigger a global recession. Beyond economics, the military standoff is terrifyingly unstable. US and Chinese warships operate in close quarters. One mistake could spark disaster. Diplomatic channels are frozen, replaced by threats and posturing. The United Nations is paralyzed, with the US and China blocking any resolution. Without communication or off-ramps, the world is left watching as three nations edge closer to war. The fear of miscalculation is real and growing. The stakes are global and the clock is ticking. Many are calling this a modern-day Cuban Missile Crisis, drawing chilling parallels to that tense October in 1962, when the world held its breath as two superpowers faced off over nuclear missiles in America's backyard. Now, history seems to echo itself. Once again, a superpower standoff is unfolding just off America's coast, with a Latin American nation, this time Venezuela, caught in the middle of a dangerous geopolitical chess game. But today's world is far more complex. China, unlike the Soviet Union, is an economic powerhouse, deeply tied to global markets, supply chains, and investments. Its motives are less predictable, its strategies more subtle, and its influence stretches far beyond military might. The relentless 24/7 news cycle and the viral power of social media amplify every move and misstep, fueling public anxiety and leaving little room for the kind of quiet, back-channel diplomacy that once helped avert disaster. The world watches and wonders, can this crisis be contained, or will it spiral out of control and ignite a new global conflict? Optimists point to economic interdependence, hoping that the deep financial ties between nations will force leaders to step back from the brink and seek compromise. They believe that, in the end, shared interests in global stability and prosperity will outweigh nationalist fervor and political posturing, but pessimists see two great powers locked in a relentless struggle for dominance, with pride, politics, and public opinion making meaningful compromise nearly impossible. The world is teetering on a knife's edge, balanced precariously between a tense standoff and the possibility of a global catastrophe that could reshape history. The coming days will be critical, as every decision and every statement could tip the scales toward peace or conflict. The choices made in Washington, Beijing, and Caracas will not only determine the outcome of this crisis, but may also shape the world's future for years to come. Is this just a footnote in history, soon to be forgotten, or the beginning of a terrifying new chapter in global affairs? Tonight the world waits, hoping for peace, fearing the worst, and wondering what tomorrow will bring.